Coming up this week on the Digital Lifestyle Show 792, Gary and Richard are here. We've got lots to talk about. We'll be talking about things like Raspberry Pi with Spectrum emulation, new builds of Windows 10, the next version of Windows 10, we know what that's called, Mars Rover, smart home, smart cars, all sorts of stuff. Let's get straight to Gary and Richard. Richard and Gary, good evening.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Good evening. And more positive view of the world this week, I think, as we progress with out of lockdowns and vaccines, and I've been playing with spectrums, and not much better week.
Indeed, I said that this summer we'll do some kind of thing from one of the retro museums, and I'm more hopeful that
Yes.
could happen.
Yeah,
obviously, there's no guarantees, but I'm hopeful.
Yeah, I'm definitely hopeful on that as well.
Yeah, it's definitely looking good, and it's a good technology story, really, isn't it? I mean, it's a massive human story. I know I'm not taking away that, but the technology has been used for these vaccines and the various different ones. And,
to be honest, it's also a Microsoft story. I know we haven't really mentioned much about it, but we've spoken about RNA in relation to Microsoft research before. And RNA, the whole research they've been doing on RNA and the programming of it and everything like that, a lot of that has gone into these vaccines. So it is a really interesting correlation between the whole world out there in terms of technology and what's actually happening. Although we probably shouldn't mention Microsoft and vaccines in the same breath, because then the conspiracy will have a field day. But
and that's another story entirely, and perhaps something we can also cover at some point. These fake news stories, and Microsoft, and it was I can't remember the group. Was it Microsoft, Intel, and a number of technology companies all working together to sort of combat fake news stories?
Yeah, indeed.
Especially around the vaccine stuff. It's we don't need the fake news. We've got enough of it. But yeah, it's great to see the real cutting edge technology like these RNA vaccines really having to see an effect on it. I know that the data's early yet, but and I guess there's a lot of people working on reports of the the effectiveness of these vaccines, and that's another area where probably Microsoft technology is being used for machine learning and all that kind of thing for analyzing the results.
Yeah. And obviously, once the quantum computing stuff is off the ground, that's going to be huge for this sort of research and ability to tweak things. I think that's going to be very key for this whole idea of combating variants as they come out and responding very quickly to that. So yeah, it's all interesting stuff. It's very much a technology story.
There's going to be books and all sorts and TV series and movies and everything made about this era, which we're all living through.
Yep, indeed.
Interesting. We talk about we briefly mentioned the NHS app, and each country have their own sort of medical apps, and whether these apps, how effective these apps have been for the contact tracing, and whether we'll get to use these for some kind of vaccine passports or anything like that. So maybe to get in a venue, you might have to Bluetooth yourself in with the vaccine. It's interesting whether that, aside from the political and ethical and whatever, just the technology of that, whether that becomes into force.
Yeah, indeed. And I mean, there's a lot of ethical questions there, but technically, there's a lot of things you could do. I mean, certainly with the machine learning and the AI side of things, I mean, we've done stuff where you can recognise people entering a venue very quickly, because when it comes to event work, you normally have a list of people who are going to attend. So you have sort of ticket holders for that event. So if you've got the ticket holders and you've got access to their personal information because they've had to perhaps pre-submit the fact that they've got a vaccine, you can then check them on entry very quickly without having to go through handing over passports or whatever you need to do that. So there's a lot of things you can do along, but the efficacy of it gets in the way sometimes, which is quite right and proper that you should do. But it's an interesting one.
Yeah, it's going to be. I've got some concerts booked later. Well, they've been booked for the last 2 years or whatever, but they've been shifted to all later this year. So I'd be fascinated to see when we eventually do get to big, arena concerts, what the technology that they use to to get in there, or whether there is any restrictions at all.
If anybody wants help on that side of things, just they know where to ask. That's what I do.
Yeah, I guess this is something you've got to factor into you're not just factor into the whole equation, isn't it? It's not just whether you've got a valid ticket. It could potentially be whether you've got some kind of negative test or
and to be honest, that's nothing new for the event industry. We've always had sort of access control where you've had criteria of entrance. I mean, certainly certain people will be allowed in on certain days and things like that, depending on what criteria you have. And that sort of stuff we're really used to coping with. So I don't think it's a big thing. I think this is actually something which should be fairly straightforward, as long as there's a fairly open API for this stuff to actually prove you've got a vaccine certificate, which is one of the discussions which is going on now. But definitely, as I said, a very interesting technology question.
Yeah, hopefully that means that we really want it for us. So we get to play with old computers and meet up and at a museum at some point later this year.
That'd be cool. That'd be very cool.
Yeah. I've been playing around a bit more, inspired really by Richard talking about running his TI 99 on his Pi 400. I've dug out my Bluetooth USB Spectrum keyboard, paired it up with my Raspberry Pi 4, and now I've got Fuse running on it, and it actually works really well because it's a proper keyboard. So one of the problems with the Spectrum emulators and using an old PC keyboard, it doesn't work because the Spectrum is very much reliant on those funny characters and the keyword entry. So actually that keyboard works quite nicely on that. But I was saying to Richard before, I can't quite get Fuse to run full screen, so to get that full experience. But the Spectrum never ran at 1080p anyway, so I don't suppose it's making too much difference. But I've got Attic Attack and Match Day working, so I forgot how good Attic Attack was and how frustrating it can be.
Superb game,
yeah. So that's my. So I'm still thinking of whether I could mount the Raspberry Pi into a micro drive. What I would like to do is to get that coloured display that I've got. This is the LCD display that I've got running on the Pi. Is getting it to kind of emulate the Spectrum loading with the yellow and blue bars and that kind of thing. And I don't know. I doubt there's any way to get Fuse to link with this, but you could emulate that with just a bit of a Python script or something like that.
Yeah, you could do.
So maybe I could do something like that.
Very cool.
Yes, I guess perhaps have something specifying I want a delay between when I've chosen the memory image to when it appears, and then it do its funky thing. But for just a few seconds to go, oh, do you remember that? And then, the game's up, fantastic. As opposed to, oh, do you remember that? It used to take forever. And then it would say, I'll take loading error at the end.
Yeah.
I'll take loading error. Yes, I remember that well. My friend had... Go ahead, Guy.
I was going to say that's why the Pi 400 was so good. It just you never had tapes. You had just a cartridge. Plug the cartridge in the way you went.
Yeah. My friend had an Auric 20. Was it Auric 20?
Yeah.
Which just looked like a Spectrum, but with the white keys on it. I think the Computer Museum at Cambridge have got some of those. But Harrier Attack, which I used to take about 2-3 minutes to load on the Spectrum. I remember it used to take over 30 minutes. I don't know what it was with their loader, and then it would crash at the end. But yeah, so. And nobody wants to sit through an emulated 30 minutes of Spectrum loading.
No, but then again, there are people that like playing, say, Flight Simulator and doing the full flight from, say, London to Johannesburg and saying it's going to be an 8-hour, however many hours on the flight goes on for, and do the whole thing. So, I'm sure there is a marketplace for that. I know there's various ways you can get audio piped into some emulators where it will load the audio file through and stream things. But as you say, I think life's a bit too short. There are some things I miss about the old PCs and the older home computers, but I don't miss that.
No, definitely not. So anyway, that's my plan. So if anybody's got any tips on how to get Fuse to run full screen, then that would be useful, because I can only get it to run in a window, so it kind of takes away some of the experience. Also, maybe a grey background or something. But anyway, I want to run it full screen.
I mean, would Fuse run on something like the Pico? Because I mean, I know it's a different hardware, but it's the smaller the Pi you could put it on, you might get it. It might fit in a Spectrum case.
Yeah, Pico would definitely fit in the case if it can run it.
Yeah, or Nano might do it. I know,
yeah.
I know RetroPie runs on nanos. Well, I believe it does. So, and that would also, I think, fit in the case as well. Because the problem. Carry on.
I was gonna say, I think I'm gonna have a go at a microdrive version of it and fit it in a microdrive, because that's nice. That's almost the shape. So maybe one of the micro ones might work better.
Yeah. Yeah, it'd be good fun. A good project, definitely. It's just that, yeah, I guess how would the keyboard work? I mean, are you thinking about sticking it in microdrive next to your USB special keyboard? Yeah. Because I mean, I know with the TL99, I've seen ones where they're using Arduino to map the TL99 the actual TL99 keyboard into a USB. And that can be done. But I guess.
But you need to be pretty good with soldering on that.
Yeah, and my soldering skills are notoriously terrible. I've destroyed, I think I've destroyed 2 pies in my time while trying to solder things, and I've just destroyed those wonderful general purpose IO pins, and I've just ruined them completely with my ham-fisted soldering.
It can't be as bad as my soldering.
Oh. Okay, so that's one more thing we can do in the summer, Gary.
Yeah.
We can have a solder off, see who's this work. It's going to be me.
It's definitely going to be me. I soldered 10 wires to a pie, then took the pie away, and they weren't actually attached. So I'm definitely terrible.
When I was at college, I used to be able to take 555 timer chips off a circuit board and put them, refit them back without anybody being able to tell. But that was a long while ago.
That's I can desolder. Actually, desoldering is not. I can do that. It's soldering I have the problem with.
That sounds like wizardry. That does. Wow.
It does. Yes, they're total wizard. I mean, Ian is a wizard. We know that. You're a wizard, Ian.
It's a long while ago since I've done that. I don't even know where you can get 555 timer chips anymore. You probably can, but and what you use it for, I have no idea. I used to be able to like desolder TV tubes out of circuits, and you definitely don't get them anymore.
Yeah.
Not much call for them anymore. There's another thing as well. We're talking about excitement of technology. I guess, Richard, you were pretty excited about some of the technology from NASA this week.
Yes, I was, wasn't I? And I have to say, rightly so, because the landing was magnificent. So yeah, so this is we are going very off piece now, but this is the landing of the Perseverance rover on Mars, which happened. Was it over the weekend? I think it's when it went. When it landed, and yeah, there was basically a repeat performance of Curiosity's landing, where they come down by a parachute, then fire rockets, and then drop the rover down on effectively a sky crane, they call it, and then and away it goes. And this time, the added twist, the little bonus that happened last night, was they recorded it on video, so we got to see the video of all the events, which was utterly spectacular. So it was tremendously exciting, and I'd recommend anyone who's not seen it just to watch the video of the landing process, because it's like watching a science fiction film. You can't believe this thing really happened, and it all really worked, and it's there. Although I can't resist mentioning the fact that obviously there's Linux running on Mars now. And the audio and the audio stopped working halfway down. So anyone who's trying to make audio work on Linux will be going, yes. But I'm sure that was planned. I'm sure it wasn't the usual problems I experience whenever I try and make audio work on Linux. But yes, I think massive congratulations to all the team involved in getting that rover down on Mars. Just an astonishing technical feat, really.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and actually, we mentioned about fake news before. I did see that. There was some video of the Mars land that was fake news, or a fake video, and it got 17 million views over the weekend before it was pulled because it was fake. Just kind of highlighting how fake videos and things can really spread, and this is one of the things Microsoft were talking about, how this group of people are going to try and tackle that, because it's such a difficult issue or a difficult technical problem to fix, because it's human. The human brain for sharing things, and just because it's and how this one video, a fake video, got that many views is probably more views than the actual NASA video.
Indeed. Although, to be fair, I mean, companies like Microsoft are kind of part of the problem, so it's good to see taking steps to address it. But certainly, if you look at some of the work that's been done on Azure of late and some of the certainly you can generate sort of fake voices and things without needing too many keywords at all now. And of course, Microsoft are very careful to say, it's been done ethically way, it'll be checked out. But you can use these tools, and Azure is an example of such tools where you can create all kinds of fake things and very, very, very distressingly realistic now.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Now, not fake news is we know the next version of Windows 10.
Oh yeah, 21H1. Yay! That's me being enthusiastic. It's the big one. It's the big one.
Yeah. We kind of speculated this last week, I think, and for the last few weeks, really. But it's official. Microsoft have named the next update to Windows 10 21H1, which is the first half of 2021. Yeah, this is not going to be a major big bang update.
No, it's pretty much what I think everyone's been expecting for quite some time now. So this kind of seeped out, I think, around the time we did the last show. I think. It was
another site had kind of leaked it.
That's right. Yeah, I think it might have been Neowin picked up a blog post in the hardware compatibility forums at Microsoft where someone had said it's 21H1, which is, of course, we all suspected it just no one had actually used it. And then I think it was the next day or the day after there was one. I think it was released to the beta channel, I think, on Insider. Yes. If you want it, you can choose to download it. And there's a big old blog post which you can see you put up there about what's in it. When I say big old blog post, not a big blog post because there's almost nothing in it at all from what I can see.
Yeah.
And they basically said it's going to be deployed using the same tech as 20H2, which came out last year to very little fanfare. There's a few very, very minor things in there, aren't there? But I think they've done some bits and pieces around the Windows Hello camera. A few issues fixed, some things around Windows Defender, but nothing that dramatic or big, which is kind of good because we don't want that many dramatic or big things in there. But I gather the rumours are there'll be a bigger release later on this year. Although obviously that's not been mentioned yet, and we've not seen anything in the dev channel for that yet. Although there have been more releases in the dev channel. One thing I would say is that I believe that, isn't it this the for sake of a better word, 21H2, that's likely to be the next long-term servicing channel for Windows, I think, after 1809. And that's slightly risky because it would have been good to have made the bug fixed version, if you know what I mean. The long-term servicing channel, which only really applies to certain enterprise customers, obviously, who particularly want a long-term servicing channel version of Windows. But it would have been perhaps nicer not to have had that be a big bang release, if you know what I mean. So there is that. Although there are issues with the long-term servicing channel anyway, because they've, as I understand it, pretty much halved the support.
Yeah, the average, it was 10 years, was it? And it's now 5.
It used to be, it was 10 years, so it's now 5. And although Windows 10 IoT long-term servicing channel is still 10 years, so there is that, which could be a concern again for enterprises who need Windows machines to stay fixed and unchanging. So that could present a problem for some people. But as far as 21H1 is concerned, yes, it's coming. It'll be here, I would think, the next month or so. I guess next couple of months. It's very, very light. And it's officially out in the Insider beta channel if you want it.
Yeah, it's an opt-in, like you mentioned. So there's just as the previous one, I think it says download and install if you want that option. So this is where I think the rings and the channels and the opt-ins and everything are starting to get more confusing again. We're back almost like when we had skip ahead and everything else now. So you've got 20H2 on release preview. You've got 20H2 on the beta channel. You've got 21H1 also on the beta channel, and then you've got unknown testing version on the dev channel. So you've got 4 versions of Windows with 3 channels.
Yeah.
So it is although to be fair, there's so little difference between any of them apart from the dev channel that there's not a huge amount that goes between them.
No, I mean, although that said, there was one very useful feature that appeared in the dev channel, because I think at the end of last week we got a dev channel build, didn't we? Was it last week? I think, yeah. Build 2.1.3.1.8, and that actually included an incredibly useful function, which is a paste as plain text. Which I don't know about you.
That is the killer feature for this.
I just
Absolutely.
need that. I need that right now, everywhere.
Yeah.
So that's one of the things that why is that not in Windows right now? Because I want that now. It's so useful. And of course, the worst thing is it's running only to a subset of insiders that are doing the old A/B testing again. So not everyone's getting it in the dev channel. So it's quite maddening, really.
Yeah, I use the Windows clipboard or the Windows V clipboard all the time because it stores the history on there, and that's the one thing I really miss is that paste as plain text. So but I use it on my work machine, but I don't want to put that onto just for that one thing. So hopefully that gets backported to to other versions, and we don't have to wait till whatever 21H2 or something for that one, because I really like that. It's very useful.
It's a sort of thing I'd hope to turn up in the Windows Experience Pack, or even in Power Toys. It's such a useful thing. Although that said, I mean, I do tend to use paste as plain text while the word feature in it, because it's obviously been in Word for a while now. So it's just when I'm not in Word, it would be useful to have it.
Yeah, definitely. It's I thought that was a great feature. The cloud, what was called Cloud Clipboard, is now called Clipboard History. Is a very useful feature, and paste as text is definitely very handy.
Absolutely.
There wasn't a huge. Oh, there was actually. I said there wasn't a huge amount in that build. There was for ARM64 users, as it is available again.
Exactly. They finally stopped breaking it. Happy days. So you no longer need to download and install a separate preview version of the ARM664 C++ redistributable package. So and yes, it works again. Hurrah! Until they wreck it again. So
So that was it's a decent update. I mean, there's a lot of fixes. I'm scrolling through it on the video. There's a lot of fixes to these builds, but they are really very much granular, individual fixes rather than big changes to the operating system.
Exactly.
And we've seen, haven't we, over the last since Windows launched, when Windows 10 was new, we got loads of new features, and over time it's become more stable, and until it's got to the point where we're looking at things like paste to text as new features and getting excited about that. Yeah,
although you see, that's a good thing, because in many ways you kind of want the system to stabilize and just become rock solid, and say so paste as text is exciting, because that's actually a feature that will improve almost all users' quality of life, because nothing is more maddening than when you paste a thing from, say, a website somewhere else, and it's kept all the formatting and it just looks hideous. You just have plain text. So, but of course, it does sound as though.
It's one of those features you wonder why it's not been there before. It's so useful and pervasive throughout what people do. You just wonder why they never did it.
And I would say much kudos to whoever on the Windows team put that in there, because it's going to change my life. That's for sure. It's great. I mean, again. Yeah, so I think many people would rather it just stayed rock solid. I know we get excited about new features, but I'm getting concerned that we might see a huge big bang at the end of this year now. We've still not seen any hide nor any sign of what's going to be in there, apart from rumours, which always worries me a bit.
Mm-hmm. Well, there's a lot of stuff going on under the skin. That's for certain at the moment. And a lot of developer stuff going on. So this whole window. I mean, the last build there was a whole thing about the move to the newer development platforms of Windows and that, and a lot of the stuff they're doing at the moment supports that. So there's a lot of things you're not seeing happening.
And of course, one of the things that they actually released today that may enable things like that clipboard is that they've done another one of those feature experience pack updates, which is where they're testing this mechanism of rolling out new features to Windows 10. So instead of it being in the build or an incremental build patch, it's a change to the feature experience pack, which may be how they deliver these updates going forward in the future for Windows 10X and future versions of Windows and old versions of Windows, and maybe how they manage turning on and off features. So this might be why it looks a bit weird that they're doing it this way, but I think perhaps when they're looking at supporting multiple versions of Windows like 10X and IoT and other stuff, and this is how they deliver those features independent of the core OS. So the one that they released today was just they improved the reliability of the handwriting input panel. So again, nothing too exciting, but I don't think that's the point. I think the point is testing this way of delivering features.
I hope you're right.
Yeah, because I mean, once they get to Windows 10X and Windows 10 are pretty different under the covers, but they share a lot of common components. So this is, if they want to turn on a new feature, then a new build, the builds are separate, aren't they? Totally different things. So you couldn't deliver it through a new build. You'd have to either incorporate those features in new builds or do it through this kind of mechanism. So that would seem to make sense. But as of yet, we've still not heard anything of Windows 10X. It's like the product at Microsoft that shall not be named. So although there are still there's the official emulator, which you can still try. It's available from last year with the dual screen one, and it does give you a good flavor for how the internals of Windows 10X are, but without some of the sort of the end user features that they've been adding recently. But I'm still optimistic that we'll get something to play with on 10X other than the dual screen version at some point. We shall see. We've got a few events coming up, haven't we? We've got Ignite coming up. It's next week, isn't it? I think it's next week.
Yep.
I've signed up
next week.
That one.
Yeah, I think it's next week.
Yeah, it's next week. It's I think it's March. Is it March 2nd and 3rd?
It is, yeah, next Tuesday.
Yeah, I should know. I'm doing something for it, but
yes, so am I. So hopefully I'm anyway. So I'll be, so but I don't know whether they'll announce anything at these events or whether they have a special event for it. They've not said. And then what we've got build in May time, isn't it? Something like that.
I'm hoping that there'll be something interesting at Ignite, but I'm not holding out too much hope. But there has to be something by build shortly.
Yes, let's hope so.
I would hope so.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of stuff coming for Windows this year, and I think Microsoft are just trying to work on their timings of it. I don't know. I don't know whether they've been burnt in the past about setting expectations, and then people have criticised them when they've not, when they've been too open and gave too much information up front, or but they kind of seem to have gone the other way. It does seem to be a bit of a pendulum effect. I think we talked a few weeks ago about the Windows 8 era when they were totally secret, and then we went back the other way. We got more communication with the Windows 10 era, and then we've kind of gone a bit more quiet, and they're keeping their cards close to the chest with this current sort of set of updates. But we shall see. But certainly, if you're doing any testing on the Insider program, there's things to test, but they're not huge new features. They're all incremental improvements, apart from the paste as text, which we all love.
We all love, yeah.
Yeah. So we got 21H1. We got a new builds, and they leaked a few bits and pieces updates for it as well last week. What other? That was all the new features I think we got for Windows last week. Did just get an update for the Surface Duo, which I'm just going to have a look at, which is for the launcher, which it looks quite interesting. So I'll have a blog post on that tomorrow. I see a lot of tweets about the Surface Duo. A lot of people interested. I think that price point is still in the UK, still looking pretty scary. Although I did see that they've you can get a fair decent trade-in, a bit like Samsung have got a fairly, I guess all these companies they outsource these to third parties. But if you had, I think it was an iPhone 11, was it an iPhone 7 was like £350 if you had that. You're trading against Surface and various Galaxies and Pixels and iPhones. I think you could get £500 on some of the iPhones interesting that the iPhones hold the value the most by the looks of it.
Mm-hmm.
Well, what happens when these devices go through these trading programs? What happens to them? Have you ever found out, where they go beyond the initial, posting back?
Yeah,
it's a good question. I'm not sure. I mean, I think if they can be resold, they get wiped and cleaned and resold. I suspect they probably just go into a big recycling bin, and the valuable materials to take that. I mean, Apple's got, I think, automated tools that will actually strip iPhones down to the component parts now.
Wow. So that's where the value comes in.
Well, possibly, or if they can be resold, they'll be resold, I would think. But again, this is pure speculation on my part, if I'm honest.
Yeah, but I mean, it makes perfect sense, and there's a huge industry in recovering components out of phones and the like. I mean, it's interesting that some of the earlier pieces of tech have actually got more value in some of the latter pieces because they have more rare metals in them. Because there's been a concerted effort to start using less and less of certain metals like lithium, etc., in products over the years. But whereas the early stuff had a lot of it in, and that's now very valuable. So quite often the scrap value of a bit of technology far outweighs its resale value.
Yeah. I've often wondered though. I sent off I traded my Pixel in, and I thought, I wonder what's going to happen to it now. But some of the deals you get with the trading is actually quite good. So if you've got a fairly recent Samsung phone, one of the Galaxies, or a Pixel or an iPhone, like I said, the iPhone 7, you still got $350. So it does make the price a bit more palatable. Because it was last Thursday, wasn't it? The Surface went on sale in the UK and some of the European countries as well. And there was an update for that came out on Thursday as well, which included the February security bulletin for Android as well. So Microsoft doing the monthly security update for Android, which is good. Although they did miss a month in December, but we'll let them have Christmas off. And there was some other touch improvements as well and things like that. So just like with Windows, when you first get the device, there's monthly updates that have got lots of changes to them, and over time these devices, the changes calm down and they're just surfacing updates to your surfaces. But yeah, interesting to see. So I've got a video of what the changes on the Surface Duo and of the build videos. Interesting, you mentioned last week I got a really big uptake on the number of views on the build videos, which I released Saturday morning, last Saturday morning. Also, another build came out on Friday evening for UK time, so I did Saturday on this week as well, and a much smaller viewer. So I don't know. I
was wondering, was it because you got a retweet from the Windows Insider team? Because
that happens anyway. They do that. Okay. All they've been doing. So I couldn't really see a difference between sort of getting into the thousands on one and the hundreds on the other. But we're just 7 days apart, almost posted at the same time, same thing. But I don't know if it's down to Google's algorithm on YouTube or something like that. Maybe somebody that other people haven't done them or something like that. But perhaps if I figured that out, I wouldn't have to. Wouldn't be doing a weekly podcast. I'd be making millions on YouTube.
Yeah, it's very difficult to make millions on YouTube.
Yes, I think. Yeah, that's a definite. Yeah. But I've posted videos of these builds on there anyway, so I do like doing those. So yeah. I don't know how many I've done those now. Quite a lot. Right. What other stories did we have for?
I was going to ask Richard how his quest for cars is going, because I think Hyundai must have been listening to our program last week, because they seem to have built a car which matches your spec.
I should have to take a look. The issue I'm having at the moment is again, I'm afraid it's a lockdown issue in that I can't get a test drive anywhere at the moment of anything.
Well, you won't get a test drive on this one because it's only just been announced today, but the Ioniq 5. But I wanted to mention it because it's got a couple of tech features which are really interesting. Firstly, it's got an 800 volt battery, it's not battery, 800 volt electric motor system. Most cars are either 200 volt or 400 volt, the electric EVs. And you might say, well, so what? What's important about having 800 volts? Well, obviously, the higher the voltage, the less amps you need to put in it to charge it. So it means you can charge a lot quicker with the same, as long as you've got the charging capable of going faster. It will actually charge in. So they reckon you can get 60 miles of range in about 10 minutes on this car. Which is really good. So and you can basically fill the tank up in about 20 minutes. So that's a really good bit. But the other thing I found quite intriguing is they've actually put a solar panel on the roof. So you effectively trickle charging all the time you've got the car out, and it trickle charges both the 12 volt and the main battery. It's still got a 12 volt battery, which I find amazing. They're still putting 12 volt batteries on these things, auxiliary batteries, but. It's just conventional car manufacturer mentality, I think, having a 12 volt battery with all stuff. But yeah, so that should avoid a lot of the problems that EVs modern cars seem to have with 12 volts going flat. It's not an EV problem. It's a modern telemetry computer system type thing for cars where they tend to drain the 12 volt with phantom drain. So you should go back to your car after 2 or 3 days and you can't start it because the 12 volt's gone down, because it's actually been doing things it shouldn't be doing in the background. But yeah, so it's got some really nice tech features in it, which I thought were quite cool. But it does seem to match your spec almost exactly, which is just sub 40k, 200 mile, 300 mile range, all that sort of stuff, and very spacious as well. Okay.
Well, as we're allowed to do test drives again, when there's a demonstrator, I'll take a look.
Yep, indeed.
Yeah, that sounds good. I forgot to tell you about my exciting product of the week for me.
Oh,
a USB-C Ethernet one. So things are really getting exciting.
That's very exciting.
Yeah. I'm sorry I can't get more information about it apart from you plug this in USB-C, you put this in your network, and it works. Very handy for the when you take your Surface Go with you to troubleshoot some networking thing, and then you realise you haven't got an Ethernet port on your Surface Go. That's which is what I did when I went on site once last year with my Surface. I'll just take the Surface Go, that'll be fine, and then I've no Ethernet port.
Yeah, been there, done that. That reminds me, actually, yeah. I've got a reply to our readers' question last week. So we were talking about remote controls, and I mentioned that MyLight remote control. And I think I've got it here. Tony says that one thing you can do with those MyLights, you can work it in reverse with Zigbee. So you can. You can take your Zigbee hub, whatever it may be, Alexa or smart things or whatever one you have, and you can push it through a Zigbee to RF converter, and actually then control the light, your cheap MyLight lights using that. It's a lot cheaper than buying Zigbee lights.
Yeah, that seems a good idea.
Well, the MyLight lights are very cheap as well. I mean, because they've been out for a very long time because they predate this whole internet smart home type things. They were one of the original type of sort of LED things people used to use things. And I mean, I've looked today and you can buy MyLight lights for £3 or £4, and then for use with the RF controllers. And this Zigbee to RF hub seems to be about £20 in places. So that certainly sounded like an interesting concept to do it that way around, rather than actually putting Zigbee lights in everywhere, which would be pricey. Just do it that way. So yeah, interesting.
I sort of, I was talking about adding some more lights to the garden. So I've decided to go ahead and do that, but I'm not going to go the Philips Hue route because basically I want the spots to sort of light up in the garden. They don't need to be independently controlled, and I don't really need them color controlled. So rather than spend the exorbitant amount of money for Hue lights, I've extended the system, or used the system that I used originally, which is the Tecmar lights. I mentioned them before. So they're not smart lights. They're 12 volt lighting system with interconnectable plugs and extending cables. So I bought a 150 watt power supply, Techmar power supply, which are IP, what's the rating? Is it 68 or 48? I think, isn't it, for outdoor power supplies? But they're waterproof. And I already made a socket outside in a sealed junction box with a smart plug on the other end of it, which is in the garage. So that adds the smart side to it. Mm-hmm. So I'm going to just do that. And so I've ordered the transformer, and I've got some extra spots coming and some cable and things like that for my sort of spring project. So I'm going to be getting a pergola or something like that in the garden, and then I'm going to mount those lights on there. So, the power supply for the 150 watt, which is a big power supply, because I originally started with a 40 watt one, which did the job quite well, but because the light's only 2 watts, but what you've got to be careful of is not maxing out that power supply, because that's how you blow the transformers, is what I did to my original one. When you have them on for a long period of time, even though you maybe at 90% or something of its capacity, it can't keep up that constant. Even though the way that I have my lights on, they only come on from when it goes dark till 10 o'clock at night. But even so, that was too much. So you've got to overspec your transformers, which is what I've done. So the new one. So I've got plenty of capacity now, so I can build this pergola and fit lots of lights to it. And the lights are cheap as well, so you can get them between sort of £10 for a spot that's already mounted with the connector on and everything. Or if you want to roll your own, you can get them for a few quid and make your own, because they're only 12 volt DC, so you don't have to worry about mains cabling or anything like that. It's all handled from the transformer and the smart plug in my case. So that's where I'll be adding into my garage. So I apologise for anybody who thinks they've got to Manchester Airport a bit soon if they're coming from the north. That's my garden.
Landing in your garden, you're kind of bit
exactly, yeah. It does get very addictive, but they look really good. But I just couldn't, as much as I love Hue lights in the home, I just couldn't justify the individual spots. If you're talking, I think I was looking at 50 odd, or maybe even more than that, 60 odd quid for a single spot. It's just, I think they might even be 80 quid. I can't remember now. But anyway, when you start thinking, I'll put 5 or 10 in, it just gets ridiculous. Whereas if you're paying £5 or £10, then it's a lot more palatable when you say to your wife, this is the budget for my new project.
Talk about things on a budget. I was mentioning smart things hubs last week, and I've actually managed to get hold of a job lot of smart things hubs, the version 2 ones, which are obviously out of date but still very functional. So if any of the listeners want one, I'm going to be selling them on eBay. But if you want some, I'll do it. I do a reader's discount. so just get in touch with me, and I'll let you. But they're basically the hubs without. They don't have the power. Don't have the power supply or the accessories which came with them. So you just need to find yourself a power supply for them. But the important thing is they still have the code which you need to set them up, because you have to be really careful buying smart things hubs second hand. If they don't have the code, you cannot set them up. And although Samsung's Smart Things customer support used to give the codes out if you asked them for them nicely, they've been a bit reticent on that now, and especially since they've actually gone out of the hub business. So I think they're cutting back on the support. So I mean, that's something we purposely ought to have talked about at some point. This whole Smart Things thing, where Samsung bought Smart Things. Now they've decided that they're actually effectively making it a software-only cloud platform, doing away with the hardware. They've sold the hardware business off to Airtech. Well, not sold it off, but licensed it off to Airtech in Europe. But in the States, you can't actually buy a Smart Things hub anymore, which was its biggest market. So although it's now all pervasive on all smart things, all Samsung technology, it's on their TVs and their phones and everything like that. I mean, if you've got a Samsung phone, you can run most things on there, and you can use a lot of third-party tools. But the other interesting thing is that which will potentially get a lot of Smart Things users up in arms, is they're talking about doing away with some of the customizations that people have done. So sort of the hobbyist coding, they may take that bit of the platform away completely, which would be very interesting, because a lot of people totally rely on that for running stuff they've got at home. So yeah, I think that's a very, this whole thing of people being able to take things away from you've already bought and bought based on the fact it's got that thing is a very interesting thing, and I think there's something which eventually there's going to have to be some sort of legislation on whether you can actually sell something and with features which you can then take away later seems wrong.
Yeah, it does. Yeah, it seems to be ever more. Well, I suppose in the days when you buy things that you would buy it once and that was it, that it would always have those features. But now with everything being software based and the things could be taken away.
I bought Windows for Media Center. Where's it gone?
Yeah, you can't be upset with that anymore. You have to let it go. It's like we mentioned plenty on previous shows. It's just an ongoing thing with software and services. It seems to be with services, and obviously Google's one of the favourites for doing that. Is that Microsoft are also pretty good at doing it as well. Is just no one's using that service anymore, or only a few people are. So we'll kill it, and off it goes, and it's gone, history, and there's nothing you can do about it. I'm still smarting over Google Reader.
Yeah.
But like with in the days of consumer electronics devices, all you had to really worry about was the VHS transmitter being switched off 30 years after you bought your black and white TV. So
I think there may be a case for saying you've got to have a certain amount of life in a product, maybe 5 years, 10 years, whatever. Guaranteed life when you sell it. I think it's more people understand it more with software. I think that when you buy software, you're not necessarily getting a guarantee that the software is going to carry on doing the same thing, but with hardware, people expect it to do the same thing.
Especially like a smart home hub. If you bought it specifically because you can target it with your own custom applications. It's a very small group of users, but with a very specific requirement.
Yeah, and it's becoming more and more the case that this has happened. I mean, there's been so many hubs which have gone under. Some of them with smaller companies which haven't been able to afford the cloud hosting. So a lot of things have been victims of their own success. When you get a lot of users on a lot of cloud use, the cloud costs start going up. I mean, they probably budgeted on cheap cloud they got initially, and then the prices have gone up, and they've not been able to work with that. Whereas you think with someone like Samsung, that wouldn't be the issue. I think they're looking at it from a more it's the IFTTT approach, where they want to commercialize it and work with trusted third parties rather than hobbyists, and that's an interesting one.
It's that and that's where I suppose you go down to the things like the Raspberry Pi and things like that. If you really do roll your own with the coding, then even then the API, you're reliant on the back end APIs of these other devices. You might have spent ages using IFTTT with your Raspberry Pi and suddenly found you can't use that anymore. So it's always, there's always a risk to it.
But don't let you put people off buying smart things hubs, because they're still very useful.
Because you're selling. Yeah, absolutely. Well, yeah, you can just get them for what you if you get them for what you need now, then you get a solution that works for now, and then see where you are in the future.
There'll still be great things for controlling Zigbee. I mean, in terms of actually handling routines with Zigbee, they're probably the best thing to use at the moment. Although the rumours I'm hearing about Amazon are very interesting with their smart home tech coming up. They may be doing something very interesting which would be sort of like routines plus with a lot more functionality, being almost a proper if this then that type approach with routines on for Alexa, which would be, I think, would be very impressive. If they do that becomes a real competitor to all these hubs. I mean, I think Amazon, the Echo, is really the hub of the future, which is one of the reasons I've started looking more at Zigbee as a product for the smart home control rather than the infrared stuff, because it's just natively supported by the Amazon products. Although Bluetooth mesh is as well, so that's another possibility. It used to be that Zigbee stuff was just so unreliable and so expensive, because there wasn't really any standards. But as I mentioned last week, this Zigbee Light Link stuff is becoming a much more of a standard, and people are starting to follow that. Although there's still outliers, and you have to watch all sorts of conditions with them. But a lot of the main players like Hue, IKEA, they all have started to work together. And at the moment there's a fantastic bargain to be had in the UK if you happen to have a Lidl near you. because Lidl's got their smart living setup they've produced with their Liverno brand, and their hub and lights and things are really cheap. If you want to get into,
look at that. Yeah.
And they're Hue compatible, so you can plug them onto the Hue network as well. So you've got they are very, very cheap. I mean, you're talking less than a $5 a lamp on some of their lamps. So it's very impressive stuff. And they even have a electric heater which can be controlled on their system. So it's quite clever.
Very handy for when you're working in your shed.
Yes, indeed.
So, Richard, you'll be emerging from your shed butterfly-like later this summer.
I can but hope.
Yeah, I think that's what we'll all be doing. Hoping we can get out and start to use some of our smart technology for stuff when we're going out and about again, and start to use my Surface Go. And I actually want to go out and I want to go to meetings and use the Duo, because it is got one of the, when everybody sees it they go, what is that? But I've never gone anywhere with it, so I want to be able to take it out with me before it becomes passé. I say Huawei launched a foldable. I saw it this week for a press release, but I kind of don't really pay much attention to it because they've not got Google Play integration or the Google Play Store on them. But there's more foldables coming. So I want to get out there and show this off. I can show you, Richard. You can play with mine at the Computer Museum.
Can you rephrase it, please, Ian?
It's been a long winter.
Even if you say you can play with my Duo, no, that doesn't work. It
doesn't help.
Yeah, you can fiddle with a foldable. Oh, for goodness sake.
Yeah, I think we'll
leave it there.
Fans of Carry On 1960.
Family show. Yeah.
I'll go and watch one of the Carry On films on BritBox now.
Exactly.
Just to tell you one slight bit of technology I have found news is with some things like BritBox no longer works on Old Edge.
Yes.
So I've had a couple of people mention that to me now. So I tried it. And
I'll tell you where Old Edge is still working though. It will still be supported. Surface Hub, HoloLens, Xbox.
Yeah, well, HoloLens 2 has the new one. I know about BritBox because BritBox no longer works on my HoloLens, and I've tried it on a few different devices now, and it doesn't work with the old Edge. So, Old Edge is starting to get old, but of course it's being swapped out on all the new builds anyway. Exactly.
Yes, Legacy Edge desktop goes away. The support ends, I think, in March, and it'll be, and the icon gets changed out in April. But as I said, it's going to linger on Surface Hub and HoloLens for a bit longer until later this year.
Yeah, it is. Right, okay, so I'm going to go back to BritBox now and finally Carry On Films to look at some of the new info about yours. Richard, where can we find you?
You can find me on Twitter at Richard_Speed, but I should warn you, it's full of Mars right now.
The planet, not the confection.
Sadly, yes.
Yeah. And Gary, where can we find you?
You can find me on Twitter as well, at Gary with 2 R's, don't you, mate? And if anybody's interested in one of those smart hubs, just send me a direct message on Twitter, and I'll see. I will definitely do a discount for our loyal listenership and readership, watchership.
Yeah, we'll give them away at the giveaways when we get to.
When I've still any left,
come and buy them off you.
And to be honest, I don't think there's any problem selling them. They go like hotcakes on eBay. It's really, they really do. So it's, but because they're rare, I mean, you just can't get hold of them now. So people want them. But it's good stuff.
Well, you can find me at iSticks on Twitter. So we'll be back next week after the Ignite keynote, and we'll see you then.
All right, take care.
Yeah.